Wait.
All right, welcome everybody to the
There we go.
April
There we go.
17th virtual Rotary meeting. We're continuing to evaluate everything on a day-to-day basis, and of course I'm working with, having some conversations here also with Pete on regards to when we can all get back together. So it really is going to depend how the governor lays everything out in the next week or two. So I think, at least from some of the indications that we are getting, is that this may go on in regards to distance or having groups of 10 or less allowed to meet. Anything 10 or more are still going to be distant. So we'll evaluate that. I know the board and I are going to do a virtual meeting after this to touch on some things. We'll make sure we'll send that out. Welcome everybody. Especially some of our guests, and apparently our YouTube site's getting a lot of hits. When we're live streaming, as well as the videos that are being uploaded after the meeting as well. A lot of people are viewing that. So I have been sending it out to our two other clubs here in Greene County, the Xenia Club and the Fairborn Club, and thank you for those who are participating in this meeting, or thank you for everyone who's participating in the meeting via the live stream on YouTube. So before we get started, once again, please mute your mics, and then when we do some questions and answers with our guest, just unmute, ask your question, then mute again. So appreciate it. I will turn it over to our very own Mike Zwick to introduce our guest.
All right, Mr. Larry Hansgen, welcome.
Thank you.
Larry, I brought you a gift. But somebody drank it. Oh, and we have over 200 people signed on, Larry, because I told everybody that you were bringing Obi with you. So we have Mr. Larry Hansgen. He is from WHIO Radio. He has a face for radio, and he is the voice of the Dayton Flyers and a longtime friend. And Larry, I would like you to tell us what you want to say.
All right. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having me again. I always enjoy your group so much. And I hope that even though you're not meeting in person, you'll keep that tradition of giving a book to the library, as an honorarium, if you will. I think that's something terrific. And you know what? And really, I think, at times like this, I'm very appreciative of organizations like yours, the individuals in the organizations, and what you're able to do for the community. And it is appreciated by. You don't have to live in Beaver Creek, and you don't have to be a member of the Rotary to appreciate what you guys are doing. And because I know it's substantial, I know it does make an impact, and I challenge you to step up in the days, weeks, months, maybe even years ahead at what we're going to be facing. So it's been, shall we say, an interesting time. Let me give you an idea what the Hansgen household is going through. And I'm not complaining, I'm just telling you what's going on. So my wife, back in the fall, she said, we need to get the kitchen remodeled. And I said, I just don't care about stuff like that, let me be honest. But it means a lot to her. And I talked to some people, they said, well, it's a good investment, things like that. So we decided to have the kitchen remodeled, and they began middle of January. And so that was, a complete tear out, and sinks weren't available. You couldn't do it. So we didn't really have use of our kitchen until the very end of February. And then we moved into this pandemic. So I have seen so much carryout food over the past 3 months that when I see a styrofoam container, I start to salivate. It's really been kind of an odd situation. And then we were empty nesters until the end of February, at which point in time, my son decided, well, he's going to move home temporarily while he was looking for another apartment. Well, obviously, those apartment hunting plans were put on hold. And then shortly thereafter, my daughter, who's a senior at UD, she came home. So we've got the kids are all back home, plus everything that was inside their apartments is stuffed into nooks and crannies in our home. My dining room is now my daughter's classroom as she's taking online classes and finishing up at UD. So it just goes to show that our lives have been disrupted and continue to be disrupted. But obviously the thing that felt the most disruptive at the time, and I think as we've gotten further away from it, larger issues have taken precedent, as they should. But I was sitting in a bar in Brooklyn, New York, a Mexican restaurant. It was Wednesday, would have been, I believe, March the 12th. I think it was March 12th, yeah. And it was the Wednesday night of the week of the A10 tournament. And there was a gathering of all the radio guys in the A10. And we were all sitting, we had kind of a little private room for our get together. We were all sitting around talking, and all the different broadcasters and sports information directors from the other schools were offering up condolences because the Dayton fans weren't going to be able to see the A10 tournament, because at that point in time they said, well, the tournament's going to go on, but just with a limited number of, like just moms and dads in the stands, and that would be it. Well, and they were saying, gosh, we feel so bad for you guys fans. You guys fans are so great. One of the guy from LaSalle said, we're used to playing in front of nobody, so this doesn't affect us. So we just as soon have an empty arena because it make us feel more at home. So we laughed and joked about that. And then we were looking up, and there was an NBA game on in the background. And then all of a sudden we saw them pull the teams off the floor. And it was that game involving the Utah Jazz, in which Rudy Gobert had tested positive for the virus. Well, before you know it, the NBA pulls the plug that night. And wow, that really got our attention. But we're still going to play the A10 tournament. And there's still, and I think that at that point in time, Governor DeWine said, well, there's not going to be people in the seats for the first four at the UD Arena. So we're trying to get our arms wrapped around this postseason of basketball, which is not going to have, the usual pomp and circumstance and the fans and all that. The next day at noon, VCU was playing UMass, and Dayton would play the winner of that game in the A10 quarterfinals the next day. So Josh Pastorino was going to work the game with me. He and I go over to the Barclays Center, and we decide that we want to watch the game because it's good preparation to see who we're going to play the next day. And already outside, there's just nobody outside the arena. It just had a spooky feel to it. There was one concession stand in the entire building opened. The pep bands for both schools were there. They were playing. There was very few media people there even. It was really, really just a very, very odd feel. And we went out and sat down, and we're going to watch the game. And they blow the horn, and both teams go to the bench, and they've got their little huddle going, and they're getting ready to introduce the starters. And then it stopped. And then someone came over and started, talking to the people at the scorer's table, talking to the coaches. And I saw the VCU coach Mike Rhodes turned to the small knot of fans that they were allowed to have behind them. And he just turned and said, thanks, folks. Thank you for everything. And then they walked off the floor. And the PA guy said, the Atlantic 10 championship has been canceled, effective immediately. Please travel safe. And that was it. And so, whoa, what an empty feeling. And you knew that what was going to happen afterwards was so up in the air. And we got a message about an hour later that we're going to go ahead and fly out that day. And we got on the plane, and in the time it took for the plane to load up and just to get pre-flighted, before the plane even took off, everybody knew that there was no NCAA tournament, and there was nothing. There was nothing ahead. And I've been on a lot of team flights through the years and bus rides, and in 37 years of doing this, and I thought I'd seen it all. I'd seen coaches turn and stomp up and down the aisles and yell at players. I've seen celebrations after big victories, and I've seen very quiet rides, but nothing like this. And I think the emotions, it was a combination of sadness, of anger. It was grieving. You know what it was? It was grieving. And what are the different stages of grief? I think it's denial, and then anger, and then acceptance. And I think we're finally at acceptance after, at first, just it was so surreal we couldn't believe it happened. Then obviously everyone felt angry that something was taken away, and I think probably the fans felt the most anger. You would think it would have been the players and the coaches, but and I think it speaks to the character of this team, and that's really what I want to talk about mostly today. That they did not make this all about them and internalize it and be real selfish and woe is me and me and I. They got surprisingly reflective for young men, that age, guys in their early 20s and some cases just teens, to understand the big picture of life and everything involved. And I think they have an appreciation for what they accomplished. I obviously they can't help but wonder what if. But I look back at the final game of the regular season, and it was almost as if the scriptwriters knew how the story was going to end, so they had to insert a happy ending earlier than the final minutes of the movie, because thank goodness that they treated that final game and that win over George Washington as a championship celebration. It would have been very easy to just say, all right, season's over, 18-0. Yeah, we won the A-10 championship, but let's not cut down nets. Let's just do that in Brooklyn. Or, we have bigger fish to fry. We got bigger things we want to do. And certainly that was the attitude. I mean, they did not feel like they were done. They had bigger things they wanted to do, bigger things they felt they could accomplish. But to really celebrate that moment, everything about it. And I look at that game, and to me, that game was a microcosm of the season. It was a game in which they, at times looked like they were, maybe not totally I wouldn't say totally engaged, but they just had a team was staying in the game that maybe shouldn't be in the game. And then in the midway through the second half, part of the script of the season was for Jalen Crutcher to just explode over a 2-minute period. And he does that. He scores 11 points in 2 minutes. And then, Obi, his dunks were the highlight of the season and kind of defined his career. And he saved the best for last. The flurry of 3 dunks he had in the second half. And it just kind of symbolized that game. And you saw all of those guys do the things that they do to help this team be what it was. And Coach Grant got to give a curtain call to Jalen, a curtain call to Obi, and then obviously the curtain calls for the seniors. The seniors got to speak. Coach Grant got to talk to the crowd. They got to cut down the nets. And I think without realizing they were doing it at the time, they created closure when that was the only closure that was possible, because so many what ifs were hanging over this team and have been for the last 3-4 weeks. I think it's been easier once we got beyond that first Monday in April, when I was sitting home watching TV and said, I should be in Atlanta right now. I shouldn't be here. I should be in Atlanta. But now that we're outside of that, maybe it becomes a little bit more easier to deal with moving forward. But yeah, it's been tough. I want to talk briefly about what I thought made this team special. And then I'd love to answer your questions, because they're always good ones, and I mean that sincerely. But I think what made this team special was their character. And this was something that if I had a chance to talk to anyone at any point in time, and I think I began this message in the summer even, was that this was the highest character group I'd been around. And it was the staff, the assistant coaches, Coach Grant, the players. This was a high character group. And you know, and we've had good kids here in the past, and there's been some great coaches in the past. But I tell you what, to a person, just exemplary. And they enjoyed each other's company so much. They enjoyed playing together so much. They enjoyed each other's successes so much. But at the same time, they pushed each other so hard in practice. They pushed each other to be better. But it was a labor of love. And you know, if you've heard Obi at all, and as he's made the parade of national interviews here, as he's won award after award after award, you know, he talks about his takeaway was the feeling of brotherhood that he had. And I think that's what made this team special. They were efficient on offense, freakishly efficient. And I went back this week, in fact, and I listened to Coach Grant's introductory press conference the day he's being introduced as the new coach of the Dayton Flyers. And I listened to the whole press conference, and he talked about style of play. He goes, on offense, we will be aggressive, we will be unselfish, and we will be efficient. And lo and behold, a short time, just 3 seasons after he said that, this was a team that was the most efficient team in all of college basketball. It was among the nation's leaders in assists per game, and they were aggressive. They didn't go out and just not lose games. They beat people. They won. They won because they had the will and the force of mind to win these games. So this is a special team that's got a special place in my heart because of the people involved and because of what was accomplished. Dare I say, you know, stuff that I hope will not be the only time we see something like this, but to have a team win 20 games in a row, be the 3rd ranked team in the nation, lose only 2 games, consensus coach of the year, a player of the year, and all but 1 award. Wow. This was some very rare air, which we breathed this year. I think that, you know, it's a victory for a culture. It's a victory for a way of doing things. And as such, when you've got something established, you've got something built, now it's a matter of maintaining it. And I certainly think that next season is one of which I have a lot of optimism, if in fact they get to play. So enough of my ramblings. Questions out there?
Larry, can you address what the apparent free agency now in college sports with the transfer portal? It seems like a lot of teams have players that are just moving at will from team to team over the course of their careers. Yeah,
it's I don't like it because I think that part of that, and I'm going to sound like, hey, get off my lawn, man, you know, but part of what this college basketball experience should be is you know, most of these guys aren't going to play pro ball, so forget about that. You know, the one and doners are out there and they'll go play in the NBA. But I'm just talking about your average run-of-the-mill college basketball player. You know, a guy that's, you know, that's playing at UD, he's playing at Wright State, he's playing at Bowling Green, he's playing at Miami, he's playing, you know, wherever. Part of, I think, the experience is learning to persevere, is learning to push through adversity. It's learning to be part of something that's bigger than you. And when I see the current culture in college basketball with the rampant transfers, what I'm saying is it's selfishness. And I think it's not going to ruin the sport, but it's going to hurt it badly. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll ask a question, Larry. You know, obviously we know you as the voice of the Flyers, but I also know you with WHIO Radio. How do you personally manage two full-time jobs at least, being the morning news guy and covering the Flyers many times late in the night, and you have to get up early the next morning?
Well, I mean, that's just a time management thing, you know, and you know, we've all had, I think, points in times in our career where we've had moments like that, and you know, you just find ways to do it by hook or crook or naps or whatever. I don't know. I just try to what I try to do really, Mark, is to marry the two jobs together, and to not think of them as, you know, well, I'm punching the time clock at one job, and now I've got to grab my lunch pail and go punch in at another job. And I try to marry the two of them together and think, all right, what's my primary role? You know, my primary role is to basically talk about stuff that's important to people in Dayton, Ohio, and to provide them a link to things that are important to them. So whether I'm broadcasting the game itself, or then the next day recapping it, or telling them about, you know, a very vital school issue that's going to be coming up, or, you know, I just try to wed them two together and try to, you know, make it one job. Maybe that's just my way of just tricking myself into not being tired.
Got a question real quick. I'm interested in your thoughts on the kind of in the West Coast, the trend now is that they're going to start letting players receive maybe, you know, sponsorships or other money for playing. What do you think that might do to, you know, college sports in general? Do you think that's a positive or a negative development?
No, I'm not sure yet. I mean, I think from a fairness standpoint, I mean, you realize how many number one jerseys Dayton sold, you know, and they didn't sell number one jerseys because it's someone's favorite number. And they've always done that, though. I mean, they've always sell a jersey, and it just so happens that the guy that wore number one's one of the best players ever there. But, you know, I think that I think it's only fair that someone should be able to, you know, market themselves. The issue that concerns me is that, you know, any rule you have, someone's going to bend that rule, break that rule. They're going to use it as a way to cheat. Okay, so, you know, who's to say that, you know, pick the school that you hate the most. I won't name the name, but pick whatever in your mind, whatever school you hate the most. And they've got a major booster who has a car dealership, okay? And so that school will have that, you know, they'll sign a recruit, and that recruit that they really want to sign is going to do, you know, he's going to get a $50,000 a year endorsement fee for doing car commercials. You know, that kind of thing could potentially happen. And you know what? And I think it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt small market schools. You know, the guys you're seriously, you're recruiting. You could say, hey, you know what? Come play in Dayton. There's still a lot more opportunities for you to do card signings or commercials or things like that than there are for you to go to Ypsilanti, Michigan. I think it's fair that someone should be allowed to, you know, benefit from their own name, but I think that there's got to be some type of framework to put that in, whether it's a cap on how much they can make, whether it's, you know, how boosters are involved, whatever. But why couldn't this Dayton team, you know, why couldn't Obi go to you know, I don't know, go to a restaurant and sign autographs for $5 a pop? Why not?
Larry, I want to ask you a question about one of the most amazing things about watching Dayton play was that their best player was the best sport. He helped people off the floor. He never seemed to show a negative attitude. He was unselfish. It just looked like their best player was the best teammate. It's rare that you get that. Is that, from your perspective, because of who he was coming in, or the culture created by Coach Grant, or a combination?
I think it's definitely a combination. I mean, you know, that, you know, you really saw Coach Grant mold him, but I mean, his as far as from a behavior standpoint, but his values are there. Obi's core values were there. You know, and you know, whether it's just he was brought up well, or he's that's just innately who he is. I had someone tell me a story that they were on an airplane, and they were struggling to. It was a woman who was struggling to get something out of an overhead bin, and all of a sudden, she said, a very large person reached up and took it out and handed it to her, and it was Obi. You know, and I've seen him do stuff like that. I mean, they had to have a security person travel with the team this year, because there was such a, you know, there were so many people looking for stuff to get autographs, stuff to get signed, agents and stuff hanging around lobbies, NBA scouts. And then we had another guy, one of the guys, Brett Comer, who was one of the grad assistants. His job was kind of to be Obi's handler, in that he would just get him off the floor, get him in the locker room, and because he'd be talking to kids and signing stuff and saying hi to people, and he wouldn't know when to say when. You know, that's just who he was. And all the NBA scouts, I mean, you picked up on something about him being a great teammate. That is what they raved about. Every time I talked to one of them, they'd ask me some things, and then they go, man, this guy I've watched practice, and he's just a great teammate. He is a great teammate.
Well, we have about 1 minute left. Is there any quick questions out there?
Real quick, Larry, if you were on the playground and you had to pick 5 players from UD for the last 40 years, from your perspective, who would you select?
So the last 20?
40. Let's go back 40 years.
40, okay, because that way
in less than a minute.
I can get Chapman out there. Okay, I'm going to have Roosevelt Chapman. I'm going to have Obi Toppin. I'm going to have Ryan Perriman, because I want competitors and I want tough guys. And I think I'm going to have Scoochie Smith out there run the show. And by God, if I'm not going to have Jalen Crutcher complete that 5.
No Don May, huh?
Well, he's outside 40 years.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.